couple more people joining. So I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. Today is Tuesday, March 9th, and I would like to call to order the City of Edina Heritage Preservation Commission meeting. Emily, could I please get a roll call?
Yes. Commissioner Longquist?
Here.
Commissioner Pollock?
Here.
Commissioner Cundy?
Here.
Commissioner Birdman?
Here.
Commissioner Whitmire?
Here.
Commissioner Nebo? Here yet. Commissioner Everson?
Here.
Commissioner Hassenstab?
Here.
Chair Schilling?
Here. Thank you, Emily. First order of business is to approve the meeting agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
Motion to amend.
Okay, we have a motion to amend the agenda.
Oh, sorry, sorry, I'm withdrawn. I am looking to amend the minutes. So
Okay.
I have a motion to amend this agenda, sorry.
Okay.
I move to approve the agenda as submitted.
Okay, do I have a second?
Seconded.
Great. Emily, could I get a roll call vote on approving the agenda as submitted?
Yes. Commissioner Longquist?
Aye.
Commissioner Pollock?
Aye.
Commissioner Cundy?
Aye.
Commissioner Birdman?
Aye.
Commissioner Woodmeyer?
Aye.
Commissioner Everson?
Aye.
Commissioner Hassenstab?
Aye.
Chair Schilling?
Aye. Thank you, everyone. The next point on our agenda is approval of the meeting minutes.
Motion to amend.
Okay, we have a motion to amend the minutes.
Second.
Very good. Emily, at this point, can you walk me through what happens with an amending of the minutes?
Yeah, if Commissioner Cundy wants to say what his amendment is, and then if Commissioner Longquist agrees to that, she can second that specific motion, and then we can vote on it.
Great, go ahead, Commissioner Cundy.
So I'd like to request that the minutes for the last meeting reflect that there was discussion between the commission and the building official for the city with respect to procedures and recourse for non-permitted demolition. And
I second that amendment.
A point of clarification, are you saying that in the section 5A for, no, not, it's not, is it the 4524 Drexel Avenue?
4630.
4630, excuse me, I'm sorry. So it would be, you're amending 5C, the COA for 4630 Drexel Avenue, and you want to add it there, or are you asking to amend to section D for a whole new thing to talk about the process?
Specific to the property.
Okay.
May I add a discussion point here, since I believe that's Commissioner Cundy, since the conversation it is specific to the property, but it will be a brief reference. Since it happened after the applicant was off the call and was more of a policy discussion, I don't know if there's guidance where it needs to go.
I would suggest that we could put it after the motion and the vote. Here that you guys made the motion was made, the Heritage Preservation Commission voted on the motion, and then after that it was discussed.
I'm good with that.
So we'll be adding a section D.
It won't be a section. I would say it would just be underneath the motion, so you can kind of, it wouldn't be its own section in any agenda. We wouldn't be amending, because it goes by the agenda as it was approved. We'll just add a sentence or two after the motion under that agenda item.
So as I'm reading it here, it said the motion carried because it was a motion to not move forward. So you're saying the sentences would come after that. So if anyone's looking at their actual document, it would come after the bolded part of what the commissioner's votes were on the motion that was made.
Yes, that's what I would recommend.
Got it. Thank you.
I have a motion to amend the meeting minutes from our last meeting in section 5C after the vote and the motion carried by the commission, that the commission had conversation with the city official based on repercussions for non-permitted actions of the property owner. Do I have that correct?
Correct.
Yeah, the building official on procedures and recourse for non-permitted demolition.
So we have moved and seconded that change. Emily, can I get a roll call vote on that change?
Yes. Commissioner Longquist,
Aye.
Commissioner Pollock,
Aye.
Commissioner Cundy,
Aye.
Commissioner Birdman,
Aye.
Commissioner Woodmeyer,
Aye.
Commissioner Everson,
Aye.
Commissioner Hassenstadt,
Aye.
Chair Schilling.
Aye, thank you. Now, we have just voted to change those meeting minutes. Do we now vote for approval, or is that caught up in the vote we just took?
That should be caught up, because we're basically saying there was a vote to amend the minutes. I don't believe you are required to have a whole nother vote you basically said
Okay.
our aye was to accept the minutes with that amendment.
Great, thank you very much for the clarification. Are there any other changes needing to the minutes? There you go. We will move on to the community comment section. Emily, is there anything here that we need to discuss?
No, sorry, that shouldn't have been posted. We're not doing community comment during COVID. All the community comment is taken by city council. So I apologize for that. But no, there's not any community comment tonight.
Great. Thank you. That brings us to the next section, the reports and recommendations to our annual elections point. So at this moment, we will take nominations for both chair and vice chair for the next year for this commission. Do I have any nominations for chair for next year?
I guess I'd like to nominate you for chair, Commissioner Schilling.
Thank you. Does anyone else have another nomination?
Do
or
we
a
second those?
I would second the motion of Chair Schilling for another year.
Okay,
So that's an official nomination. And then before we vote, it's sort of like, okay, are there any other nominations?
very good. Are there any other nominations? All right, let's take a vote. We are voting that I will be chair again next year. And a roll call vote, please, Emily.
Commissioner Longquist,
Aye.
Commissioner Pollock,
Aye.
Commissioner Cundy,
Aye.
Commissioner Birdman,
Enthusiastically, aye.
Commissioner Woodmeyer, Commissioner Everson,
Aye.
Commissioner Hassenstadt,
Aye.
Chair Schilling.
Aye. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for the vote of confidence, Commissioner Birdman. You have big shoes to fill. Okay, now we need to vote for vice chair. Sarah is not here. She is eligible to be nominated again for vice. We also will open this up to any other nominations. Do I have a nomination for vice chair?
May I ask, is she willing to serve in that role? I would very much love her to continue if she's willing.
That's a
Well,
very good question, and I
well-
don't have the answer.
What I do know is that she has expressed in previous discussions, she would not accept an offer to eventually become chair. I think that her conflict of interest and so on and so forth, she would find that difficult to do. I know vice chair is the one role that she has been willing to play. So I don't know if everyone knew that or not. So I just wanted to share that, but I don't know about for the next year going forward, if that's something she still wants to have. I guess I'll make a motion I would like to nominate Commissioner Pollock for vice chair for the next year.
While I'm very flattered by that motion, I will have to decline it.
I will keep a straight face then.
Do I have any other nominations?
Well, then I would renominate Sarah to vice chair, since that she's not here. And oftentimes when you're not here, you oftentimes can be placed on these types of roles. Hence how I became chairman so many years ago.
Do I have a second nominating Commissioner Nimmo for vice chair?
I second that and hope she approves and we can figure it out if she doesn't, but I think it's a great team and let's keep the stability for now.
Very good. Emily, can we get a roll call vote on that nomination?
Commissioner Longquist,
Aye.
Commissioner Pollock,
Aye.
Commissioner Cundy,
Aye.
Commissioner Birdman,
Also enthusiastically aye.
Commissioner Woodmeyer, Commissioner Evertson,
Aye.
Commissioner Hassenstab,
Aye.
Chair Schilling.
Aye. Thank you, everyone. We have the same chair and vice chair for next year. Okay, so chair and member comments. That is our 20, well, do I have any member comments before we dive into the work plan?
I would like to open a discussion, if we could, to do some debriefing and reflecting on just the policy aspects that were raised by the Drexel home. Realizing we won't talk about specifics necessarily, but I feel in the same way that the 4602 Browndale, for those who weren't here, it was a demolition of everything but 2 brick facades that went too far. The commission reflected on how could we, adjust our procedures. And I feel that the Drexel case merits a similar thing, especially learning from consultant Vogel how challenging demolition by neglect situations are. And really, I think our objective is to avoid those at all cost. So with that in mind, I have 3 thoughts and then would love to open discussion to other commissioners just to hear their feedbacks. My 3 action points would be to request that Emily let all of us see what is the city code for maintenance that was referenced in our discussion last month, just so we're familiar with it, and if appropriate, how do we act on that, or complaints or so on. Number 2 is I reached out to the State Preservation Office and have examples of 2 cities that have demolition by neglect ordinances, Stillwater and Minneapolis. I don't think we need to go there. I don't think we necessarily want to go there, but I do think for our commission to just see that language and be educated, I would ask that we send those 2 attachments. And then the third piece that I would love to just open for reflections from others is, should we be adding additional conditions when the COA is such a major one? We're so fortunate to have 3 architects on our board right now. There are some plans that come through that you can tell is more than just a bump out the back and some slight fix-ups. And so I think the architects can help us see, oh gosh, they're moving a stairway, they're moving load-bearing walls. There could be, a workaround. I'm just thinking maybe we can get out in front of some future cases if we wanted to have that policy discussion later. So those are the thoughts I wanted to share.
Does anyone want to comment on any of these 3 points that Commissioner Lundquist has brought up?
Chair, if I may, I have some additional information that I think would be valuable for the group in reflection and in evaluating Commissioner Longquist's recommendations.
Great, go ahead, Commissioner Cundy.
So shortly after the meeting last month, in really the hours afterwards and the following day, I learned a number of concerning facts about the reality of 4630 versus what we had been told. The owners, the actual owners of 4630 have and had at the time of that meeting already purchased a new home, and we're already going through renovations of that property using the designs that had been designed for 4630 in that new home. They have no intention of ever living in that home, which is why it was for sale. This is information that was given directly by the owner to another property owner who was on the call, who's on this meeting last month, and who spoke with me afterwards because the information they had been given, that individual as a real estate agent had actually shown the property that day, and had talked with both the owner and the selling agent. The selling agent is not an agent for the homeowners, they're an agent for the developer. That agent is telling prospective buyers that they have to work with that developer and that the house is being torn down. And and then later that night, we're told that the owners are going to build that house no matter what, but it was just a matter of which way. And in reality, and not to toot my own horn, because I actually felt bad right after the meeting about how far I had gone with my gut instinct, but in reality, the developer attempted to get us to approve a tear down of a home so that they could sell an empty lot. And that's exactly what happened, or what they attempted to do. And those owners have no intention of ever living in that house. And so I think having some more controls in place, as Commissioner Lonnquist has suggested, will protect us from, I'll say, predatory developers who believe that they can come in and fool this committee and the citizens of Edina and the residents of this neighborhood into believing one thing when that's not really what's going on. Again, all of this direct information provided by both the agent that's listed that property and the owners of the property. So
Can I
that's,
clear a couple things up too, just based on some comments and everything? So the request was to build the house that was approved with that COA, but to do that, they were gonna have to remove more than 50% of the walls. So the request was not to tear the house down and build whatever they would like. It was to tear the house down with the approved COA, with the plans that were already approved with that previous COA. So if for whatever reason the house changes hands, anything like that, they have that approved COA as long as they have permission to use those plans from the builder, or if it's the builder. Otherwise, if there's any changes, they would have to come back to the Heritage Preservation Commission for an updated COA for whatever they're looking at doing. So just so that's clear for you guys.
I think that the challenge that I have there, Emily, with that is what would we actually do? So I understand the process that's in place, but what would we actually do if, what position would we be in and what position would the city council be in? I believe that if we had approved that the next day, almost all the walls, if not all of them, would have been knocked down on that house. And if it changes hands, how would we hold anyone who's a new owner accountable to what a previous owner had said they wanted to do? I think that's impossible to believe that we could, or that the city council would do that. And so I would go a step further, and I don't know if Jane had this in mind, but I think that we should request that the owners are on the calls. You'll note that the developer of this property said, well, I thought the owners were going to be here, but I guess they're not joining. I'll venture to guess, because my guess last month was correct, that the owners didn't want to join because they knew that the developer wasn't going to be telling us the truth, and they didn't want to be there when that happened. This was a developer trying to use the auspices of completing client work to gain a competitive advantage in a neighborhood where we're not supposed to be exploiting historic property. So I understand what you're saying, Emily, and I believe that to be correct. But I wonder in reality how that works out. We had one commissioner in the last meeting vote against not approving the plan, and their comment was that they believed there was an inevitability to what was being asked for. And I think, to Commissioner Lonnquist's point, we need to provide fewer avenues towards inevitability that skirts the whole purpose of this commission.
I think the proposal is maybe a good one. I hadn't thought of that, just to have the owner on the call or present at the meeting. That's a low cost, easy step.
I think we can encourage that. I'm not sure. I would have to check into actually requiring that or not.
In my opinion, I think the question here is that not so much just what HPC purview is and its power and so on and so forth, but I think this really extends deeper into the city council and the city as an entity for enforcement and so on and so forth. What area does it want to go? In my opinion, if you want to really bring some more teeth to this situation, you're going to have to really get the council and the planning commission and the building, people and whatever, again, beyond HPC, to really want to re-examine, say, okay, if someone were going to flout or literally, to your point, Commissioner Cundy, lie and obfuscate what the real goal is, and assuming you could then determine that's what the case was, what are the real teeth that the city has? And what I took away from last month's conversation with our building inspector, who I thought was quite forthright, it's limited as to what could actually be done. And the question then becomes is, if we're starting to move into a phase in the community for which you might see more of this being attempted, which I think is really what we're trying to get at here. It's like in a one-off case situation, it's bad enough. It's another to where someone feels they can get away with it, and then it sets a precedent or it sets a map on how you can navigate around the regulatory and the intent of the district and the HPC and so on and so forth. But then you basically created a map on how you could avoid it. Isn't that really what the concern is?
Speaking for myself, absolutely.
Okay, so all I'm saying is that from our organizational part of it, that I don't think there's enough in our preview to take our own step for that. I think if this is a significant concern for this group, I think we need to then approach it by saying we want to have a discussion with either representation of the council, the planning commission, a city attorney, so to really try to get a better handle on if this is a route this is headed. Is the city council interested and wants to be engaged in figuring out more ways to guide this so it's less likely to happen?
Emily, can we have our city planning meeting or retreat, whatever the right terminology is for
Yeah,
that?
the work session. I think you guys, if you want to bring that up, I guess I would wonder what the request is. Like, what are you asking them for? I understand your concerns. I think there are some other, like Michael was saying, for example, like generally a demolition permit isn't approved until there's a new home permit that is also approved. So they're not tearing things down before they have approvals to do something else. A new home permit in the country club district isn't signed off on until it goes through your process. So there's kind of, I understand where you guys are coming from as far as concerns go, but there is some steps in the process that kind of are making sure that things are working as they're intended. And I do, like I said, I do understand your concerns and everything. But I think if you're going to approach the city council, it will have to be with something specific. What are you asking of them? And it's coming from the Heritage Preservation Commission, so it's from you guys. And I think if you are interested in bringing it up, the work session would be the place to do it. Otherwise, you'll have to write mission correspondence that would go to city council in a future city council packet.
Emily, are you speaking of the April 6th work session that we have with city council?
Yes, in years past, or generally how that works or what that has been used for is kind of to touch base with city council and to talk about the work on the work plan that you have been doing. But if there is other discussions that you'd like to have, that's the place to do it. You'll have 30 minutes of Heritage Preservation Commission time.
And certainly, guys, in the past, something like this type of concern, whatever is, this is the opportunity if you wanted to educate the city council and the mayor on, so this is where you could do this. So you don't necessarily have to have an ask, but what you could say is, hey, we've seen this, we've seen a couple things recently in the last 6 months, like the other project that the other one that's gone through 27 different reviews and so on and so forth. But like where their intention was they were trying to tear down a part so they could get to where they wanted to get to. That we're starting to see a flavor of that starting to show up more. You could raise a flag, a flare, if you will, that says, hey, there's more, we're starting to get a sense there's more of this going on. And we're unclear or uncomfortable with the machinations that the city currently has to help us weed this out and prevent certain things from happening. Do we have permission to go to, maybe the ask is it okay if we go and investigate further with the proper departments to say, hey, what really is where we are and where do we want to go so we can come back with a potential recommendation to you. That way, at least you're giving them a flair of saying, hey, we think this is of concern. And I guarantee you, the one person I can guarantee who will be quite interested in that will be the mayor. In my years of experience with him, he really hears that out because he's always got an ear to what's going on. Now we have a couple of new members to the city council, and they might be completely, not in a negative way, just ignorant to what these things are. And the other two members haven't been on for that long. So the mayor will probably be the best audience member for this to raise that flag because he's always interested in that. But that might be that would be my suggestion, not that I'm recommending that we do this. That would be my suggestion. If you want to activate this concern in a meaningful way, that's how you might consider doing it. That would be my 2 cents on that.
And I guess one other thing I'd like to add, and then I'll let you guys do the discussion, is at least in the past, the 2 examples that we've had in the last year, I think the process has worked as it's intended to. It's gone through the Heritage Preservation Commission. You guys are required to process applications that we get. We can't control what those asks are, but you guys have looked at each proposal or each application and taken action on that. And I think the action that you have taken has done what you would like it to stop those requests, after they can ask what they would like for or what they would like to ask, but you guys have taken action on those asks.
I agree that the process has worked. I think that that I'm hearing and that I agree with is that this latest situation has unveiled a map, as Commissioner Birdman says, of predatory behavior that actually could work in the worst of scenarios. And I think it was summed up when we asked the building inspector in the last meeting what would happen if the property becomes so damaged by neglect, and he said we would tear it down. So that's the end point that someone with predatory intentions might see as a map. And what I believe this commission is concerned about is that someone may actually get to that point. So I think it's a great idea to raise the flag with the mayor and with city council, and we can work together to create some language around the April 6th meeting with the city council. I'm happy to have that conversation with them. I do think we need, I think it's the unveiling of a potential, and we want to be able to create the roadblock so that potential doesn't happen.
And I would just add that while we did vote against that proposal, there's still a house that I'm sitting 400 yards from that has no roof and no windows and a giant hole next to it with melting snow. And so we may have won a battle with respect to that house, or I won't describe it as a battle. We may have skirted the first attempt, but that house is not yet safe by any stretch. I walk or drive by it at least 2 or 3 times a day, and it is subject to the elements right now. And that's of great concern to me because it's a heritage resource that is not protected. And I feel as though this commission is toothless in protecting it, given what's transpired. So I would echo everything that Chair Schilling just shared, but this is not a closed case on 4630. It's not a resource that's safe right now.
If I can chime back in, I like the direction strategically, Commissioner Bergman, that you're going. I think that's important because, look, the homes are getting older. We do need to start to raise this, but I think we can't be afraid to be very specific about the concerns here, and it is a chance to educate. I can pull up our training booklet, has language about that the city will take all necessary steps. I'm not going to quote it, but to protect preservation resources that have a COA issued. I'm happy to, send it. And in this case, the city, a permit was violated, and the city, the language, I was concerned by the building inspector. He said, oh, it went a little too far. Oh, you're asking me hard questions. There are other ordinances in the city. If we park on the street overnight, we get a ticket. I'm a little concerned that it was very selective enforcement. And I do think we need to be comfortable raising this specific instance to the city because is that a miscommunication between departments or what? But let's always have the trend of fine tuning the procedure, but let's not be afraid to step away from this was a bit of a mess.
Well, I just want to let you guys know, David Fitch, the building official, he is not the one that is enforcing the property maintenance code. So he was answering questions the best that he could because he's involved, with buildings. He works with the health department on issues that arise, but he is not the person, or the building department is not the department that enforces the health code, which falls under the International Property Maintenance Code. So he was answering questions the best that he could, but he is not the enforcer of that.
Well, Emily, not to put you on the spot, but I did ask you more than a month prior to the meeting about the roof and my concern. So I think we at least need to know what are the proper channels.
Mhm.
If there are concerns, who do we go to? We don't want to get in the city's business, but we want to be sure that flags are raised so that there's goodwill with the community.
I can get you guys the property maintenance code and that information, and that's that we take complaints on, and the health department acts on those complaints.
I think the one thing I would come back to is that if, for those of you who were on the commission last year, remember the mayor was the one who asked us to modify and clarify our notification process, right? Because of one situation where someone got mad about whatever it was and so on and so forth. We went through that. That was on a notification of a project being done, right? It wasn't that the project was in violation or was this or that, even though the homeowner thought, the neighbor thought it was, but go from there. I think this is, again, the way you frame it is that, to what you were just saying, Jane, is that you want to make sure it's educating them and saying, like, we're concerned about our job, our purview is to protect a classified preservation resource. And there seems to be a lot of telltale signs that that's not happening, whatever the intent is. And that's where it gets, this is where it gets like this, okay, when we start getting into all the intents and so on and so forth. Outside of the intent, it's that this particular resource does not seem to be protected by the homeowner, and what are the auspices under the city's charter and capacity to ensure that as much as can be done to take care of this asset is done, because that's what the designation is, right? It's dereliction of duty if you have a dedicated resource and you just basically don't do anything. It's like if the city decided that the Cahill School, yeah, I'm not going to put any budget in this year to take care of the maintenance on that, I'm just going to let it erode or whatever it is. It would literally be violating its own regulations, right? And again, I mean, if the city itself did that, what would be the recourse for that? Well, I guess the citizenry would have to then hold their elected officials accountable, right? It's kind of, I mean, that's kind of where this goes. So I think what you're asking for is the right thing. I think it's a matter of how do you want to frame this? And I think Emily is dead on. What's the ask? Because we can inform, but the ask is maybe not for them to take an action, but to say, do we think this is important? We don't think there's enough here, or there's gaps, or there's potential gaps. We think we need to tighten this up because we're concerned. We're being proactive on this part. The thing that you guys have to be prepared for, you might have city elected officials who say, well, I appreciate the proactiveness on, but we're not going to go down that path. We'll only do it on a reactive part. And that might be the case. So I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case, to be honest with you. Not good or bad, but that's sometimes how things work. And I think Emily's I think giving good advice, good guidance as to, even though the process is, we might think there's some holes that potentially people get around, in these two cases, it didn't break. And I think that would be something that people would argue, is that, okay, well, the process might be imperfect, but we didn't break. Now, we might argue, well, that's maybe based on luck or based on something else that's not replicable. So I just think that it's really important to really think about, and as a group, not just as the people who are arguing for this, but as a group, what's the group statement that you want to make? And so, Jean, maybe you could go back over once again, maybe based on what Bob has provided and what we've talked about. Is there a different way you want to reframe or update whatever you said, or is what you said still hold water based on the discussion?
No, I think your counsel is good. I would like to ask them to advise us how we can fulfill our obligation. And I think we should quote, and I'll be glad to, share with Chair Schilling or Emily some of the language, the code, in order to uphold these resources when we're starting to run into some maintenance issues with empty properties. And we've had 2 challenging cases. And we want to avoid future messes. So we're exploring maintenance code. We want to very much avoid demolition by neglect. And so I personally, now Commissioner Cundy may have different issues, but I think if we name those, we can name addresses, we can name cases. I think it would be important to reference that in this case, there was a demolition permit that was not followed and was not enforced. I want them to be aware, because I'm sure they're getting angry calls too from some, other residents. So, but I do think it's the proactive, the long-term, how can we avoid this? We can look at conditions on our end, but City Council, how can we coordinate to be sure that heritage preservation resources are preserved and code is followed? I would just open it in a broad discussion. I'll see what Commissioner Cundy has to say there.
Yeah, I think, in reflecting as Commissioner Birdman was speaking, if I were a developer who had listened to that call in our conversation with the building official, or even our call today, I'll tell you exactly what I would do. I would go and I would buy or contact homeowners in the neighborhood, and I would come up with a plan that could be approved by the Historic Commission, get a building permit that worked. I would tear the roof off the house and I would sit and I would let the house fall apart, because I'm acting under, even if it was under the appropriate demolition. The roadmap, and I'll just be really clear, and even if it's on, this meeting, the roadmap here is that you say you're going to do something that it seems perfectly reasonable to all of us. I'm going to replace the roof and do this addition and, add some living space for my family. And you start it to the point where the protection for the resource is gone, and then you stop. And then the city tries to figure out your intentions and waits for enough phone calls and decides whether to take action. And by then it might be too late. I think that Commissioner Hassenstab is probably correct. If I had to bet today, I would bet that that house on the end of Drexel Avenue is not standing in a year. That's just probably the reality of where this is. And so that's the roadmap for how you tear down a house in Country Club. You say you're going to do something that's valid, you get halfway through it and you stop. And you let water and snow and rain and dirt and nature run its course in a state where the severity of the seasons is as extreme as it is anywhere in the country. And so what I would actually propose, if we need to go forward with a concrete proposal, and this will take some legwork, is I think there's some key things that we know are key to the stability of a home: foundation, the roof, and the siding and windows. And so maybe the proposal is that when you're renovating a heritage resource, that you have to include a timeline under which you are going to be doing any modifications to those foundational elements, start and finish. And we, as was stated earlier, we have enough architects and people in with general knowledge of these things, people who have done remodels, to know whether those timelines seem appropriate or not. And and ask the question of whether the city would support enforcing those in a more proactive way. Because, frankly, if they're not, the prospect of them saying no to that, as Commissioner Birdman suggested, would lead me to question personally why we're doing what we're doing on this commission. If we're here to give awards and rubber stamp, dormers on windows, but not to protect whole buildings, then I'd have to ask myself whether I'm willing to spend 2 hours every once a month and time on other projects doing it, because that defeats the purpose. So if we have to have an ask, that's what I would propose, is that there have to be timelines associated where they outline how they're going to get from the current state of a building to getting it protected.
Go ahead, Commissioner Pollack.
Yeah, Commissioner Cundy, I just want to say I love your passion on this issue. I feel like you speak for a lot of us. I have a few sort of comments to what you said, which is, at the beginning in the discussion about this particular house, and now, in a discussion of roadmap for developers, I do think it's important to, stick to the facts and not, try to read intentions, good or bad, into those. We don't, you may know a version of the truth. We may have been presented a version of the truth. It's somewhere in between. I think, there are natural barriers to someone coming and neglecting a house to the point where it can be demolished. Economics is one. It's expensive to buy a house and let it rot. Number two, reputation. I think, certainly, that's a concern for a developer and for a homeowner. So, whether and to the extent there should be more barriers to being able to do that, I think is the fundamental question that we have and that we're going to talk to the city council about. And I guess my thought, as to what you and Jane have said, I think we should back out a little bit from making a specific ask, such as, we need to get a schedule for when they're going to, do specific things relating to the exterior of the house, and simply, I like the Jane's question and framing of it. I think we need to leave with a recommendation, which is, regardless of whether we can answer this question tonight, empower us to work, collaboratively with other departments and the city attorney to come up with a recommendation to bring back to you as part of the work that we're doing. Not get very specific, because it could be, once we hopefully are empowered to do this and sit down with other building departments, there may be some other things that they actually would want us to do and perhaps codify into city ordinance. So I guess that would be my recommendation, is to just have a very general ask of the city council so that we can go and, get more facts to figure out what is going to be the most effective way to address this concern.
Commissioner Pollack, I'm glad you're on I'm sorry, Emily. I just wanted to say I'm very glad we have a legally trained mind on the call. I think that's all good advice. I do think we can be specific with referencing at least the maintenance, the maintenance code, as a potential tool enforcement, because that is an existing code citywide. But beyond that, I very much like your approach.
I think you can use the time, we only will have 30 minutes. So how much can we get done in 30 minutes? You can use that time. I mean, I know the city council reads minutes and they're aware of the work that other commissions are doing. But you can use that time to kind of inform them of what's happened, what your concerns are, and kind of, if you're thinking maybe you do want to do something as far as city code, that's something that would be eventually put on your work plan, which we'll start working on pretty quickly, honestly, with 2022 coming up here. We start in the summertime. So if that's something that you guys are going to want to talk with them, you could kind of propose, you start those conversations early, if that's something that you guys are going to want to look at doing.
I will get some notes together about talking points in preparation for that April 6th meeting. And I'd be happy to share those with Emily, who in turn can share those with the rest of the commission. these are, I mean, I do think that this warrants a conversation with the city council. And I do like the approach of guidance, backed with specifics.
And I sent the email out, but some people get confused with what city council meeting this is. This is a city council meeting, a work session where the whole entire Heritage Preservation Commission is invited to attend and encouraged to attend if you guys are able to.
Okay, are there any other talking points here? I think this was a great conversation. Okay, any work plan updates? I can tell you that Commissioner Whitmire and Commissioner Pollock and I have been working on some information points on the walking/biking tour of the history of schools. So that's underway. And Emily, I'll have to reach out to you to find out next steps for maybe the marketing department. I don't know which department it was that created the map for the last walking tour, but we can get that information to you because we're just about there. Any other working plan updates? Okay. Oh,
Thanks. Our group had a good call with our consultant and our staff liaison today. And so we're moving forward with outreach to the eligible properties, and we'll finalize those materials, and Emily's going to start to work it through the communications team so that we can start to hopefully do those mailings in May and then have the bulk of them done by the fall.
Fantastic. You guys have done great work with that. Anyone else? Any other updates there? Okay, so the next section is the staff comments section. Emily, go ahead.
I was approached by the city's liaison, or the city's person that works with the Historical Society, and in 2024, the 100-year anniversary of the Country Club District is coming up. And so they wanted to gauge the Heritage Preservation Commission's interest in teaming up on some sort of an event that will take place to celebrate the 100-year anniversary of the Country Club District. And I didn't want to speak for you, so I just wanted to see if there's general consensus that that's something you guys are interested in, and I can let her know.
I would be very interested. That sounds great. Any public outreach that we can do to generate interest around what we do is fantastic.
Hey team, I think we can use some of the distribution lists that we have for the neighborhood as well. Certainly generate a lot of interest amongst the neighbors. And there's probably some budgetary things that we might be able to work with too. So some folks that maybe Bob and Jane and I and others can work with. The magazine's really cool, and I'm sure they'd love to see something like this.
Right, so 2024, so this will be on the work plan in 2 years.
Yeah.
Never too early to start, Jane. We
No,
want
I
a big
agree.
budget.
I
We
agree.
want a big budget, so we're gonna have to start planting that seed and watching it nurture.
Perfect.
My wife and I were planning on having a 100th birthday party for our house, Great Gatsby style, with like the spinning spotlights and whatnot. So everyone's invited.
Let's make sure you get the proper permits for that, Bob.
Count me in.
And then the only other update that I have is that the Edina Heritage Award is live. We're looking for nominations currently. It went up today, and we're asking for nominations by April 5th, with the intention that you guys will approve, or you guys will take action on one of those applications at your April meeting. And then it will be presented at City Council in May during Preservation Month. So if you know of any properties, any projects, we're all accepting nominations now.
Great. Thank you, Emily. Anything else from you or staff? Any other staff? Okay. If there's nothing else, the last order of business is a motion to adjourn. I have a motion from Commissioner Birdman. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, Emily, can we get a roll call, please?
Yes. Commissioner Longquist,
Aye.
Commissioner Pollock,
Aye.
Commissioner Cundy,
Aye.
Commissioner Birdman,
Hi.
Commissioner Woodmoyer,
Aye.
Commissioner Everson,
Aye.
Commissioner Hassenstad,
Aye.
or Chilling.
Aye. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for a great meeting and conversation.
Thank you.